Hello, Mr. Sock here again with another exciting video for you. We're going to cover the male reproductive system today. And we're going to hit the major parts here. We don't have a model or anything to show, so I made a diagram up on the board. And you guys have pictures in your books that you can use also. But going through the setup, I'm going to try to go through the parts and then some of the major facts about those. So to start out with the male system, you have two testes, right here and here. And there is a tough membrane around there. And on the inside, if you peel the membrane off of these, it's going to look like a mass of bunched up cooked spaghetti, pretty much. And they're little hollow tubes, so it'd be almost like miniature macaroni that's in there. Not to be gross or anything, but that's what they're going to look like. And that would be these in here. And these are the seminiferous tubules. And inside of those, if we would take one of these little tubes and make a cross section, you basically have something like this with all kinds of little cells inside. And little green things here diagramming the sperm. So you've got the seminiferous tubules. The purple would show the male germinal epithelium, which those are developing cells. And we talked about meiosis, or sperm and egg production, sex cells, earlier in the year, way back towards the end of August, first part of September. And then along with them, the little black things represent a grouping of cells called the Sertoli cells, or the nurse cells that are in there. And so when the sperm get developed here, they don't fully have a functional flagellum yet, and they're not ready to go, so the sperm just don't get made and then travel out to the body to be able to fertilize an egg. It takes a little bit of time for those things to develop. So these nurse cells kind of hold them in place and help supply some nourishment for them until they get fully developed. And once they reach that point, they're going to be working their way through here. And this is a constant 24-hour-a-day process from when males reach puberty, which is around age 13 to 14. Once the sperm get to this point right here, this little structure is called the epididymis. And it's kind of a holding area on the outside of the testes. And so the sperm will remain there for a little while, and then until they're ready to be used, then they'll travel down this little black tube here, which is called the vas deferens. There's an enlarged end, kind of flared like here, where the sperm kind of funnel into that, and that's called the fimbriae, or excuse me, that'd be with the female system. That'd be the ampulla with the male system. Then it works its way down, and right here, the distal end of it, dumping into this little pink tube here, that'd be the ejaculatory duct. Okay, along the way, you encounter a little more fluid. So when the material is coming out, it's not just going to be plain sperm. You've got material from here called seminal fluid that's a high, almost fructose, sugary-like material to help nourish the sperm. So seminal fluid comes out of here, joins with the sperm, gets down to here, and you've got a kind of a golf ball-sized structure called the prostate gland. The prostate fluid that comes out is kind of a high alkaline material. That's to counter the acidity of the female system once the sperm get there. The female system is a little more acidic in nature, and we'll talk about that when we get to the female system, but you got to have a counter with that. So the basic nature of the prostate fluid, along with the acidic nature of the internal female system, kind of bounces out, so you get more of a neutral type setup. So, vas deferens coming down from the epididymis here, carrying sperm, mixes in with some seminal fluid. You get to the prostate gland here, and you get some prostate fluid, which, like I said, is highly alkaline, and it enters into the urethra. Okay, the male structure that's going to transport the semen, which is what that whole mix is called, out of the body. One other little setup here that goes along with that, these are called the Cowper's glands, or more scientifically, the bulbourethral glands. They're named Cowper's for Dr. Cowper's, the individual that discovered them years ago. This fluid is more of a mucus-like material, and it helps to kind of line the internal urethral, make it easier for transport. And if you notice with the male system, you have a connection here. This pink tube, the urethra, extends upward here, and this is the urinary bladder. Now, a question that may come up is, so you've got urine, and then you've got the semen coming from here. You know, do those mix? You know, or what stops them from mixing? You know, down the line. So the question is, no, there's no mixing with urine from here, with the semen is traveling around here, because you've got a little set of muscles. There's actually two of them up in there, called the internal and the external urinary sphincter. Okay, and what they do during the time of excitement, ejaculation that occurs here, these things will keep any fluid in the bladder up in here. They kind of keep it pinched tight. Okay, another question that comes up with is you hear about prostate cancer, and it's prostate, not prostrate. Prostrate is a body position. Prostate, the name of the gland right here, that's surrounded by a number of things. And if somebody has what they call benign hypertrophic prostate problems, this thing here will tend to try to develop and get a little bit thicker. It can't go outward, and so it tends to build up here, and it starts to put pressure on the urethra here, and that causes problems with males, especially when they're older. Usually about 50 is when they talk about males needing to have a prostate exam, where they physically check that out. You can ask your dad about that if you're males and you want to find out a little bit more. But it can restrict the flow here, and sometimes they surgically have to remove that, okay, which would end up causing problems with sterility even later on. So some other facts then. So sperm are being produced 24 hours a day, like I said, once a person reaches puberty, and continues throughout the life of the individual. Now, numbers are going to greatly decrease as the individual gets older. Each time there's a release, there's on the average of about 350 million sperm that leave the male body. Okay, now it only takes one sperm to fertilize an egg. By the time when we get to the female system, we'll talk a little bit more about this, but ultimately, there's only anywhere from 50 to 100, depending on which books you're going to look at, that will end up reaching the egg, because of a number of obstacles and things like that that go along the way. 350 million sperm on the average, that's about 3 milliliters on the average. That number can vary from 2 to 6. And like I said, numbers will decrease as the individual gets older. About a fourth of the sperm that end up being produced here and ending up in the epididymis, in this area here, are going to end up being defective. And by defective, what I mean is the typical sperm will look like this. We've got the head of the sperm. Inside here is the DNA. And with humans, you've got 23 strands of DNA for a normal functioning situation. You've got a base area here, and then you have the flagellum. This is the part here that's going to be kind of a twirling motion to help propel the sperm along. But what can happen is there may be two flagellum that make that sperm defective. This part may be missing right in here, which would make it defective. This part here may be deformed, and you actually have sperm that look like this. There may be an abnormality with the number of chromosomes, which would make that in some cases defective, or it may pass down some genetic mutation that can cause problems. Sometimes these things are affected if there's an infection in the body and a high amount of white blood cells. They may be attacked by white blood cells also, and that can cause the number to go down. Ultimately, like I said, about a fourth of those are going to be defective once they end up leaving the body. So that cuts down the number a bit right there. Other problems that can happen and we don't have the time this year, unfortunately, with the coronavirus problem going on, to discuss a lot of these, but there are a number of sexually transmitted diseases that can end up causing problems with this system also. One of those is gonorrhea. Gonorrhea is a sphere-shaped bacteria that can enter when somebody's having them. They're called STDs, for sexually transmitted diseases. So when an individual has sexual contact with another one that has gonorrhea, then they'll pick up the bacteria and it'll travel into the urethra. Bacteria like moist membrane type structures, and so you hear about with the COVID virus out there that you don't want to be feeling your mouth, your nose, your eyes, because those are moist membranes right there. And you've got a moist membrane inside here, and once bacteria come in contact with it, they can multiply. And what happens with the male system, that can cause scar tissue to develop along this lining of the urethra and end up with causing problems with urination, passing of the sperm, semen out of the body, because it's going to be restricting the opening. So if you had an opening like this, you get bacteria developing scar tissue, it narrows it down, and it could end up being a very painful situation. Another one that can cause problems with the system is syphilis. And right at the opening here, that bacteria comes in contact, about 75% of the time, people will end up developing a sore in that area unless they've been treated with an antibiotic. It's also an entryway for the HIV virus, for chlamydia, which is another one that's very similar to gonorrhea. Not quite as damaging to the system, though. Lymphogranuloma inguinal is another type. There's a number of different STDs that can enter the system this way here, have contact that way. And that's about where we'll stop with the male system right now. So that's an overview of all the parts that are there and a little bit of additional information on it.